And Sergey is in Peter now. So, Peterburg.
I'm going to settle in for the explanation.
Кристиан, здравствуйте. Спасибо, что приехали. Я коротко, наверное, расскажу про этот шрифт. У меня всего там один слайд. И о его цели, и вообще откуда все это произошло. Ну, в общем-то, это экспериментальный
Could you please
шрифт.
stop a little bit? I'm sorry, Sergey. So he's gonna say a few words about his type, and I guess we'll be translating because he's speaking Russian. Сергей, продолжайте, пожалуйста, только медленнее.
Окей, хорошо. Шрифт разрабатывался как экспериментальный. Здесь в основе его лежит как та же самая каллиграфия, так и, собственно, шрифтовая вот эта вот структура, прямолинейность. Но главное, для чего он был призван, его создание, чтобы как-то визуализировать те проекты, которыми я занимаюсь. То есть это не публичный шрифт, а это шрифт своего рода такой фирменный для курсов, которые я, собственно, провожу в Петербурге, которые...
So this type was supposed to be an experiment, and he wanted it to be like a mix of calligraphy and some straight lines. And this type was supposed for his project he's working on, so he's got some courses, if I'm not mistaken. Сергей, вы сказали что-то про курсы?
Да, я продолжу. В Петербурге я примерно занимаюсь тем же самым, чем занимается Илья в Москве. Тоже провожу курсы по шрифту, и это, в общем-то, главная цель сделать такой шрифт.
Sergey has his own courses of type design, so he's doing almost the same thing as Ilya does.
Okay. And this is yours and not a student, correct?
Может перевести?
What?
Oh, this is his typeface and not one of the students.
Это ваш шрифт, а не шрифт ваших студентов, правильно?
Да, это мой шрифт, буквально
Yes, it's his type.
акцентенции моих, в общем-то так, да.
It's his type.
So how do you imagine this being used?
Как вы себе представляете, этот шрифт может быть использован, Сергей?
72-й кегль и примерно вот так. Не видно.
Нет, в каких материалах вы можете его использовать? Это книги, это журналы, это что?
Постеры, акциденция, плакаты.
He says about posters and billboards and some white stuff.
Okay. It's crazy looking, but it is very cool. So I'm wondering about some of these alternates. Sergey, are you trying to decide between whether the E should look like this or this?
Сергей, вы определились, как буква Е должна выглядеть?
Это два варианта. В начале слов или в середине она вот, как в первом варианте, без языка, а в конце, например, предложения или рядом с буквой А, ЕА с языком.
He's got two options. It depends on where the letter E stands, so he's got two options.
Okay.
And also together with EA,
yeah,
you're going to use the swashed one.
So I'm not sure that that's a great idea, because this typeface is so abstract that it really asks a lot of someone who is reading it. So even if it's just a couple of words, I feel like this E is It is definitely a traditional calligraphic form, but it's so, when everything else on the typeface is so stripped down and reduced to the minimum that you need to have letters, for these strokes to not just be abstract, sharp rectangles, but for them to come together as letters. To introduce something like this, where that minimalism has been sort of flipped, and you've got a traditional swash added to a character, I find it surprisingly disruptive. For such a small thing, it really is a big change, and my eye keeps going to it and thinking about it, and then it completely takes me out of what I'm trying to read. Can you explain this vertical line? What is that parentheses?
Сергей, объясните нам, пожалуйста, вертикальную линию.
Скобка.
He says that it's a bracket.
Okay. I think this sort of has the opposite problem of the alternate E, where it's so abstract that it takes you a while to figure out what it is. So that, I think you could be a bit more explicit and yeah, add a little something to make that more obvious as a bracket. Yeah, looking at some of these forms, it's so cool how minimal it is that I just can't get on board with that E. I wonder if these strokes are a bit too close. I mean, maybe that's a very traditional calligraphic thing to do, but it feels, considering how spacious everything is, these feel very tight to me, above and below the letters. Is this a rule that you're following for calligraphy, or could those have a little more breathing room?
Сергей, это как-то соотносится с каллиграфией, или вы просто так решили сделать, чтобы линии были слишком близки друг к другу?
Ну, примерно соотносится с каллиграфией, но это вот шрифт как эксперимент, он на грани вот шрифтового дизайна и каллиграфии. То есть я большинство из этих букв могу написать при помощи кисти, и одновременно какие-то вещи мне приходилось ради удобочитаемости видоизменять.
So he says that it really has some influence from calligraphy, and he says that he can write the same letter with using brush and using pencil.
And that stroke is always so close.
И горизонтальная линия всегда так близка. Сергей, она так и должна быть.
В букве Т.
Ну, может быть, не должна.
So he doesn't really know, so maybe...
Достаточно сырой шрифт.
Что?
Достаточно сырая версия шрифта.
Okay. Do you plan to draw capital letters?
Сергей, вы будете рисовать заглавные буквы?
Of course. Они на данный момент еще недостаточно хорошо проработаны, поэтому я их решил не показывать.
The capital letters are in process now, so he decided not to show it.
Okay. That's really too bad. I would love to see them.
Сергей, работайте. Мы очень хотим увидеть капитальные буквы.
But I think the capitals are the place where you could do crazy swash things, and it would be completely appropriate and really enrich the experience of using the typeface. So, yeah, as you draw your caps, think about that, keep it in mind, and good luck. This is a cool, crazy thing.
Can I just add a couple words to this?
Yes, please.
I'm seeing this first time, but what I also notice is that you're mixing a few different constructions. You're using a lot of cursive constructions, for instance, in the Cyrillic part, but trying to stay more regular in the Latin part. The other thing which could be the place to play is the stencil idea, which which already there, but it's a little bit destroyed the recognizable, the easiness of recognition of, for instance, in Cyrillic M, which is kind of fall apart. And you're getting too much white space, so you need to find a little bit balance in this. But the rest is the basic structure, like NOTU gives you a lot of opportunities. You can play a lot around that. Спасибо.
I think Minsk has got some questions, so guys, Minsk.
Minsk.
It's
Minsk.
dark in Minsk.
Минск, вы хотели задать вопрос?
О, все, теперь работает свет. Вам как, по-русски, по-английски будет удобнее?
Лучше по-английски, но если по-русски, то тоже сойдет.
Скажите, пожалуйста, при создании данного шрифта используется как-то опыт или изучение старых трафаретных шрифтов Второй мировой войны? Спасибо.
They're asking questions to Sergey. They are asking if he was basing, if the type is based on the Second World War type.
Неожиданный вопрос. На самом деле не использовалось. Чтобы решить такие буквы, как М, Х, например, здесь нету К, с правым диагональным штрихом, который, ну, по факту отсутствует по логике построения этого шрифта, мне приходилось, ну, что-то изобретать. Возможно, я что-то упустил в этих шрифтах трафаретных и, может быть, облегчил бы себе жизнь.
Спасибо, Сергей. Минск, вам нравится ответ? Вы еще что-нибудь хотите спросить?
Спасибо.
Нет, спасибо.
Спасибо вам.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Talia, we have a warning. Nobody expects you to have kerning now. It's okay. So, tell me.
I just haven't worked with spacing enough.
So, who is going to use this typeface, and what are they going to use it for?
It's planned for non-fiction books and some periodical issues, maybe for educational or scientific texts, something like that.
Okay. So I'm getting, I mean, definitely, especially here, I'm getting some feeling of, it's almost like a broad nib that's being used like a pointed pen. So broad nib with vertical contrast. How did you come up with these shapes? Was this from calligraphy, anything like that?
It comes from broad nib shapes, but I wanted to simplify it. That's why there is such simple serifs, and some moments can be
so
some of it's very simplified, maybe.
So with that in mind, I think there are some places where it could be simplified a little bit. For example, this terminal, or really the whole axis of this is really still angled, but this is less angled. So the pen is sort of, it's like you're spinning the pen at different angles as you make these forms. So when we look at these together, the O is a more shallow angle. The D is the most angled. And the C and the E are somewhere in between. So I wonder if there are some issues with the internal logic here, where maybe you need to pick one of these and say, this is my rule, this is what I'm going to follow, and then just see what happens if you were to take the D, the C, the E, all the other rounds, and change their visual contrast axis to be more consistent with the character that you choose as your main thing. So if you say, I think the C and the E are most successful, then you'll rotate the contrast of the O a little bit more, and you'll rotate the contrast of the D a little bit less, and just make this a more consistent texture. Because what happens when you have multiple axes of contrast is you get a certain feeling of chaos. And it's a subtle thing. And in an old style for fiction books, it can be a very pleasant, sort of personable, organic kind of feeling. But if the idea is nonfiction textbooks, just information that's communicated with no real strong editorial voice involved, I think you might want to calm things down a little bit. And I think this also might affect the way you deal with the proportions of it as well, because the proportions are definitely varying quite a bit. The A is quite narrow. The S is a little bit wide. The spacing, even separate from kerning issues, I think you need to have another look at your spacing. Because even with no kerning, I'm surprised that the EY would be so close together, and yet the NN is so far apart. And I'm even more surprised that the NN would be further apart than LL. Those would generally be about the same. And one of the nice things when you have such simple serif shapes, you can really play with your serif lengths to do what you want with the spacing, and then keep the spaces in between the serifs very regular. Because, yeah, there's no variation in these in these shapes. You don't have bracketing or anything that you need to accommodate. So the asymmetrical length of this serif on the bottom of the L, it's sort of a strange thing. So you can make that a little bit longer, and it's not complicated to change the length of these serifs. So just get the spacing where you want it to be, and then adjust really the spacing between the strokes. Get that to where you want it to be, and then adjust serif lengths as needed to keep the inter-serif spacing consistent. For nonfiction, I would be wary of such friendliness. This G is doing every possible friendly thing that it can. It's got a big head that's bigger than the belly, and it's got the fun, jaunty angle on the ear. And this is really, it feels like one round oval, as opposed to the traditional stroke, one stroke. It feels like an oval that's been attached with a stick. And so that makes it feel very friendly. And so it looks a little more cheerful than you might trust in a nonfiction book. In the Cyrillic, I'm finding these stroke endings a bit disruptive because everything about the typeface is so vertical and horizontal, and it's got this very strict kind of geometry to it. So for those thick terminals to be at such a strong angle, and the overshoot on this is hard to figure out anyway, so maybe that needs to come all the way around and terminate as a flat vertical so that you just have more control over what's happening with that terminal. Do you have any questions for me? Anything that you're feeling not entirely confident about or finding particularly difficult in the typeface?
I just wanted to know your opinion. And
I think sorry, what?
Oh, I just want to hear some moments that I don't see.
Okay. So yeah, definitely the spacing and the angle of contrast, and also, you know, that carries through in the italic as well. You can see if we isolate that side, this is a very, very different shape from that. And considering how regular this is, I mean, if you look at how similar Lumbian, the U-M-B-A-N, that's the same shape over and over. It's a very regular, nicely consistent rhythm to this. So that implies that the other rounds are going to be more consistent with one another. Yeah, you can see the issue right there. So I think your struggle right now is between variety and consistency. And I think you can use your concept for the typeface to help you make the right decisions for what you want it to be. So if it is absolutely a nonfiction typeface for nonfiction books, then go for consistency.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. So, Yana Kotina. This is a super interesting one. Yana, tell me about your typeface.
Я могу перевести.
Да, я по-русски соображаю. У меня вначале был нарисован дисплейный, который вот там следующий PDF, и после этого я уже делала текстовый.
At first I made a display type, and afterwards I made the text type.
Okay.
Мне кажется, предполагалось, что текстовый, наверное, для журнала.
I thought that the text one is for magazines.
Okay.
Началось все отсюда.
But everything started with this one.
Okay. So what were you looking at? Like old wood types or posters? What era of design were you looking at for this?
Я смотрела, ну, то есть вначале у меня были какие-то свои рисунки, а потом я начала смотреть Гиза, Фарао.
At first I had my own drawings, and afterwards I looked at the Giza Pharaoh.
So this is the first time today that we've seen Bulgarian forms as well. Have you thought about doing more weights of the display?
Вначале планировалось, да, и разные жирности, и по ширинам, но в итоге вот на данный момент он один.
At first I planned to make difference in width and in boldness, but right now it's only one version.
Because I could definitely see this heavier, and I could definitely see this lighter, and it would look great for either of those. And there's a handful of things that I'm finding a little bit distracting. The main one is the structure of the A, where you've set up some pretty clear rules of construction with the way these arches attach to the stems. And then the A does something else completely. And so it's not quite holding together as a cohesive thing. And it goes back to that idea of, if I see a page of text, or even just one headline, a crazy G, that's acceptable. That's, you've got short descenders, and so you have to do something clever to fit the G in this limited amount of space that you have. The Y, it's distracting, but it's distinctive. So yeah, I can accept that as the Y. But the A, because the U, the N, R, BDPQ, everything, and the B and D could have completely round counterforms and a smooth attachment. The M and N could, and H could have a smooth attachment from the arch into the stem. But they have this stab joint that's a very distinctive thing, and it looks like a very deliberate decision. So because of that, the shape of the A completely stands out. It's coming from some other place. It's like an alien invader in your alphabet. And so you've essentially got two choices. You could try making all of these other connections smooth, or you could try making the a bit more traditional with a bottom connection like this one on the U. Just as something to try. I would actually try both ways and see what looked better. Because this typeface has a lot of crazy, interesting things going on already. If you take this shape of the A away, it's not going to ruin it. It's still going to be a crazy and interesting typeface.
We couldn't, really. We really found that A so beautiful that we couldn't just change it.
Then change all your other letters. If that A has to be the way it is, you need to make an environment where that A can live. Let's see, I'll find Latin for this. Yeah, even here, the A feels a little bit foreign to these, but I could see this working just as well if it had a smooth connection in the arches of the M, the connection of the R. It's not going to ruin it.
We decided to call it feature, the A, the feature for all family,
yeah.
to be really foreign, really alien.
Yeah. But in terms of the, it's surprising that such a crazy text face became such a crazy display face became such a nice text face so naturally. I can completely see the relationship between the two, but it really feels like you've done everything you needed to calm this down and make it work as an actual text face while maintaining enough formal connections to your display. So that I definitely have to compliment you on that. And the italic really seems to work well. So I'd be interested to see how you could take this and adapt it back to being an italic for the display face. That display face, now I know an italic would work very well. Is there anything you're wondering about, not confident in, or thinking about with the family? What do you plan to do with the family? Are there additional text weights? This looks like a bold.
У меня на данный момент там вот есть слайд 5 начертаний. Я пока продолжаю работать над Medium Bold Black, Italic только в нормальном начертании.
I'm still working on Medium Bold Black, and I have Italic only normal.
Okay. Black italic.
Вопрос был о планах. What do you plan?
Ну, наверное, нужно доделать жирности.
Probably I have to work more on the boldness.
Ну, максимально это, чтобы курсивы были тоже не только в регуляре.
And also I probably should work on the fact that it shouldn't be only italic in regular, but it should be italic in all types.
Yes.
We actually have a question from Odessa.
Yes, sorry, I missed that.
We have a question from Odessa.
Здравствуйте. Да, здравствуйте. У меня на самом деле два вопроса. Один общий, то есть не конкретно по этому шрифту, а второй немного личный. Вот. Я сначала первый, который не по шрифту.
There are two questions from Odessa.
Okay.
One is more general, not about this specific type, and the other one is more personal.
Значит, вопрос про шрифты. Сегодня неоднократно задавался вопрос, ну, во-первых, очень хороший, очень правильный, на тему того, что для чего шрифт будет использоваться. И также задавался вопрос о том, ну, то есть какие шрифты оказали, ну, как бы влияние, да, которые как бы вдохновили. Всегда ли можно понять, вот, допустим, ну, то есть я знаю, что некоторые ребята просто берут какую-то готовую гарнитуру и там ее улучшают, изменяют, еще что-то. Всегда ли можно увидеть, что, допустим, грубо говоря, это Times New Roman, но он доработан? Хорошо, плохо, неважно, просто. Вот, всегда ли можно это увидеть?
For a few times, for many times, you asked the question, where did you get the inspiration from? And какой второй вопрос? Откуда вы взяли идею?
Второй вопрос, ну, то есть это один вопрос на самом деле.
Нет, я про тот же вопрос, который ты только что задал.
Ну, я понял, да. Всегда ли можно увидеть, ну, то есть я как-то подытожу, всегда ли можно увидеть, какая гарнитура была, как это, вдохновением для вот для готового шрифта?
Can you always see in a type when you see it, what was the basis, what was the inspiration? For example, someone took the Times New Roman and just fixed it a little bit. Can you always see that?
Well, there's a huge difference between getting inspiration from something and from taking a typeface and making it into something else. So in terms of finding inspiration, I mean, the letters that we use have evolved over time, and there's only so much you can deviate from the accepted form of an A before it's not an A anymore. And the limits on what you can do are what make type design difficult and interesting, I think. But I think when you see any new typeface, my instinct at least is to start trying to figure out what would it be used for, and also how does it connect to this entire history that we're part of? So where does it fit in the general world of things? And so yeah, that's why I asked the designers today about what their inspirations were, just as a way to help them maybe get to the core of what they're trying to do with these typefaces. There are a lot of great book typefaces out there already, for example, and so by knowing what they're looking at and what they're interested in, we can see what they like about existing things and what they see as holes that still need to be filled, and contemporary issues that can only be solved with new contemporary typefaces. But just because you're making something new doesn't mean that it's completely unconnected from the history that came before it.
Thank you.
I don't know if
Отлично, спасибо.
Does that answer the question?
Это отвечает на твой вопрос?
Второй вопрос. Да, второй вопрос немножко личный. Я на экране ноутбука Кристиана увидел, у него есть иконка приложения Last.fm. Вот, поэтому вопрос будет про музыку. Больше интересно в плане того, что, вот, условно говоря, у нас есть два типа гарнитуры. Есть с засечками, есть без засечек. Какая музыка способствует работе, ну, так скажем, вот? Как-то улучшению рабочего процесса. Ну, то есть, грубо говоря, да, что Кристиан слушает во время работы. Вот так.
This question is pretty strange and personal. So this guy from Odessa asks you, what type of music do you listen when you work?
So at the office in LA, in New York, we actually listen to streaming radio from LA all day because it's offset by 3 hours, and there's this great show that they have in the morning that we listen to all afternoon, and it's really, really eclectic. It's actually called Morning Becomes Eclectic, and I don't remember why we started listening to this every day, but it's a mix of old stuff and new stuff, and because it's Los Angeles, there's even some Mexican music mixed in, and every song is a surprise after whatever the song was that came before it. And that variety is really nice. And so while drawing, that's usually what I listen to. When proofing hinting, I listen to the Ramones. Or even harder.
Отлично, спасибо большое. Да.
It's all the Ramones and X.
Thank you.
So yeah, different music for different jobs.
Я хотела спросить, вот вы просили прислать 12-м пунктом, более мелким, и хотела узнать, что вы увидели. Зачем просили прислать и что вы увидели?
I just wanted to ask you why you asked me to send you work with 12 PT. What for? You asked her to send another work where text is written in 12 size.
Oh, because it seemed, I think you would send a proof where it was called text, but none of the text was really quite small enough. And I was just curious to see, really at 12 point, at a real text size, how it would work. But I think the thing I found most important that was missing from some of the proofs, and I guess a bunch of you got this email, I wanted to see the italic and the Roman mixed together, because that's how they're used. And so only by looking at things in the real context of how they're going to be used in actual typography can we see if they're working or not. And so, yeah, I wanted to see what that relationship was. I had a feeling it was good, but I needed to see it to be sure. And we do have one more. So,
Спасибо.
I want to make one more very quick remark on this. That's not a black weight. That's a semi-bold at best.
Это не black.
You've got to go heavy.
Semi-bold.
And I know that you can draw things that are really heavy really well, so you can make that much heavier.
Дисплей может быть в 2 раза жирнее.
Okay, so thank you. And Yulia.
Well?
It's hard to be last. Sorry
Yeah.
about that. So, Flandria. Your sample had the most real graphic design to it. And so, on one hand, I really appreciate that because I can see your taste, I can see what you're thinking, I can see how you imagine this typeface existing in the world, and I can even see a bit about your process. But it's difficult when just looking at these very short bursts to see, is the spacing good? Is it really working in text? Yeah, how does this exist in the world? And if we had this RI in a word, how would we feel about that? And you've got lovely ornaments. So, one bit of advice I'll give you. When looking at text, we used to use some Latin and we used to use some pangrams, which are sentences that include every letter of the Latin alphabet in them. A lot of things about boxing wizards and quick brown foxes and things like that. What we've realized is that that doesn't really look like real text. So it's hard to tell how the typeface is really going to behave in a real piece of text. And when we're working for a newspaper, we use newspaper text. When we're working for Finns, we use Finnish text. And with your proof, it was difficult to, in 78 pages, what we really wanted was this, but in English and Russian. So here we can see your spacing is actually really good. It's really solid. The relationship between the Roman and the italic seems good. The italic is a bit light, but because it's the same general proportion, and the italic angle isn't so much, that change in weight becomes a useful thing because it differentiates the texture of the italic from the texture of the Roman when it's used as emphasis in text. But without seeing this line, just seeing things in isolation before, it was impossible to see what that relationship is. So I feel like your ya is slightly unconventional. In italic, wouldn't that often have a curved corner here? Or is that just it could go either way? That's just a choice?
I've tried that one, but I don't like this shape, so
okay.
I do this.
So your display is lighter, has a smaller X height, it's much higher contrast. Which part came first?
I can get you.
Which one did you draw
The
first?
text one was first.
Okay. And what was your process of figuring out the display, what size is it intended for?
I think it's for headlines.
But like 90, 72, 48, 110? How big? Big headlines or medium big?
I think medium big.
So if that's the case, I would look again at some of these very, very sharp connections. I ask because when I look at the M and the N, these look like they're for 60 point or so. But something like this connection on the A and the C, and even to a lesser extent the F, that's so incredibly sharp that it almost pinches off and becomes a stencil below 96 point. So I would check it at those sizes and make sure that it's not getting too thin and too brittle. And also in the lowercase, some of these serifs get very, very long on the inside, and they start to get so close together. They're tight, and they're almost touching, but they're not quite touching. So I wonder if some of these serifs need to get a little bit shorter, just so you don't have these extremely narrow, pinched white spaces. And on the outside of these diagonals, the V and W, if you want to make those a little bit shorter so that they don't just crash into the characters next to it or force the spacing to be too open so they don't crash. You have a lot of flexibility with serif length, like I was saying before, so you can just make those shorter. If it helps the spacing, you should definitely do it. And here, the descending strokes on the tse and sh and the de, and also the ball terminal and the L, they're really standing out as being quite heavy, and they sort of become black spots. And the A and the S, those ball terminals got quite a bit smaller when you transformed it into the display version. But some of these other parts seem to have stayed the same weight. So I wonder if that's worth a look at this point, just to make sure all those ball terminals are consistent, compatible sizes. Very nice lowercase figures. It's traditional to cut the serif off the 4 in old style figures, so you might give that a try. And the typeface overall is very traditional. So what are you wondering about? Is there anything you're not fully happy with in the project? Anything you're trying to decide, having trouble with?
No.
No?
We've got one question from Екатеринбург. Екатеринбург!
Да, у нас есть один вопрос.
Christian, can we talk about logos? Do you have favorite logos? I'm really interested for.
Do you hear our question?
No.
Just
talk about logos. Do you have favorite logos? I'm really interested for.
Logos, logotypes.
Yeah. Do you like logos, and do you have one favorite logo type?
No, not one.
Maybe more.
That's a hard question. In terms of making logo types, I actually hate doing logos, especially for magazines, because logo types are something that art directors get extremely emotional about. to the point where it's difficult to have a rational conversation about it. And generally, if you can make the art director happy, somebody upstairs in the marketing department is going to shatter their dreams. So I don't like doing logo types for that reason. There are a lot of logo types I really like looking at. I mean, Coca-Cola.
Which ones?
Coca-Cola is so common that we're blind to it, but actually the proportions of it are really good. It's a really well-drawn logo. Esquire magazine. The Helsingin Sanomat is worth looking up. It is the world's craziest newspaper logo. And we were really happy that they didn't ask us to change it, because there was no way to change it without making it completely different, or it would just be a watered-down version of itself. So it's this very long newspaper title, but they shortened it to HS. And the letter forms are so distinctive that even if you see just that HS, it's completely recognizable, and you know in an instant that it's the Helsingin Sanomat. And I think of the logos that I've drawn that haven't been killed at the last second, the one that I'm proudest of is for Il, which is part of Il Sole 24 Ore, a business newspaper in Milan. And they put out a monthly magazine called Il. And it was one of the most difficult briefs I've ever gotten from a client. They said, we want a really interesting, really distinctive logo, but it's a capital I and a capital L, and it has to be in capitals. And so what do you do with that? You've got one stroke and then that, and that's it. And so I think I drew 60 or 70 things, and then we finally found something. But figuring out how to do that, oh, and it had to be bold. And so
What do you think?
it was a real challenge. But
What do you think about this? About this?
Oh,
What do you think about this one?
That's one of the classics. Can you believe they've just thrown it away? That is a tragedy. That is one of the great logos of the 20th century. AM Cassandra.
Yep.
That's a real shame.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have one
Yeah,
more
thank you for your
question
answer.
from St. Petersburg.
Да, у нас есть вопрос.
Yeah, hi. Actually, I have a question about descenders and extenders elements in Russian tradition. What do you think about? Because you have analyzed many works today, and actually just one guy was thinking about this problem. So the other ones, they use traditional things for Russian types. What do you think? Do we need to break this tradition, and do we need try to produce more elements for these problems? Thank you.
That's another really difficult question. I think making things with the aim of breaking tradition and trying to impose the idea that, okay, from now on Russian is going to have a lot of ascenders and descenders. There's a lot of Russian-speaking people that are not going to be on board with that. And so an evolution like that is a very difficult thing to do all at once. And so if a type designer really wanted to make the point that this is an important thing, I think the only way you can make that point is by doing it, and make some typefaces that look like this, make graphic design with them, but be prepared to have a lot of people dismissive or upset or angry or just not accepting of this. Partly because it's going to look Bulgarian. And that's just the cultural context of things. People can't forget everything they've ever seen. And, but I can tell you a story that will give you some optimism. I have a friend in Bangkok in Thailand. And the Thai alphabet traditionally has loops at the ends of a lot of the strokes. And my friend said, well, this is our tradition, but it doesn't have to be this way. It's still readable with loopless terminals. And actually, the loops are a real problem on computer screens because you have to make the text really big for the loop to be able to render in pixels. And so if we want to have smaller text on screen, we have to get used to reading loopless terminals. And so for the last 15 years, he's been running his type foundry with a partner who's a graphic designer. So they're a graphic design studio and a type foundry. And they've been making a lot of typefaces for Thai, for the Thai alphabet, with loopless terminals. And it's funny, when Westerners come, they say, well, this is not Thai, this is just Westernized, this doesn't look like Thai. But he is Thai, and he's using his own language and working in his own alphabet and changing it to look more contemporary and to work for the context of graphic design now and how people read. And so a lot of older graphic designers were very against what he was doing. But over the course of about 10 years, they got used to it. And they would never admit that they were wrong before. But now they say, well, loopless terminals are fine. And yeah, it feels more modern, and it feels appropriate for technology and finance and certain kinds of businesses. So things to do with the royal family should never be in loopless terminals, but other things in normal business, loopless is okay. And they'll never say, they'll never admit that they've changed their mind about it. But over time, they grew to accept it. But that's the way to get a change accepted. You can't just tell it to people. You have to show it to people. And you have to have the graphic designers and the type designers working together to make things visible to the point where they can be accepted.
Okay, so I guess that's it. Could you please tell a few words about the workshop and about the works which you received, about your general impression of it?
So the general impression that I got from these, it was 18 or 19 typefaces. You're getting a good education in type design here. And there was a really nice variety of things. I didn't know what to expect before I received the files, and I thought, maybe we'll have half very similar humanist sans serifs, and the other half will be moderns in a very old-fashioned Russian tradition. And so I'm really excited to see how much variety there is in the work that you've produced and sent in. And to see that some of you, it seems like people are really following their interests. Some of you are interested in calligraphy, so you embrace that and you use that as the starting point for your typefaces. Some of you really love the history, and so you start from there and try to use the history in a contemporary way. The one negative thing that I would say about the works as a group is that they were pretty conservative. And when you're doing student projects, sometimes just doing the project and getting what you learn from it out of it is the main goal. You don't necessarily have to have a typeface that you can license to people at the end. It's okay to do a student typeface and then it doesn't exist beyond your portfolio. Because a good student typeface can get you a job. A good student typeface teaches you about type design, and you don't have to make additional money on it. And don't let that limit the things that you'll experiment with. So that's the one negative that I took away from this. But the positives far outweighed the negatives. This was really, really nice work. And overall, I'm really impressed. So a lot of credit goes to your teachers, but most of the credit goes to you. Very nice work, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And do you have any, does anybody have any general questions? We've got a couple of minutes, I think. Kiev?
Общий вопрос. Hello, I've got a more technical question.
Okay.
Okay. About kerning and about the usage of modern open type techniques. So what is more appropriate, making kerning pairs or kerning classes? Or should I do both, or just classes is okay? Because with classes I can do much, I can kern much faster and much more efficiently.
Efficiency is a main goal in type design because there is so much repetitive stuff to do in type design. Endless repetitive tasks. So anything that you can do to make it less repetitive by using kerning classes is a good thing. Because don't forget, when you make a kerning class, you're setting up things that have the same shape to be in a group together. So not only are you saving time by not doing these individually over and over and over again, but also you're ensuring that they're consistent.
Yes, I'm asking this because I have seen typefaces that use both classes and tables, both classes and pairs. And for example, some typefaces like Fira by Eric Spiekermann uses classes for Latin, but kerning pairs for Greek and Cyrillic. So
yeah,
this doesn't
that
really
like
make much sense for me, but maybe there's some secret knowledge that I do not know.
There's no secret knowledge there. There's somebody not quite knowing what they're doing with a Python script to combine kerning from different files, is what it sounds like to me.
So it is safe to use classes, and it is okay. It's
no. It's not just okay. It's good. That's definitely what you want to be doing. Don't waste your time kerning a lot of things that have the same shape.
Thanks.
Use the classes. That's what they're there for. That's why we fought for them.
Just don't mix them, and that's it.
Yeah, do not put Cyrillic and Latin characters in the same class.
Yes.
Never, ever, ever, ever do that. Because then your kerning will be completely fucked.
Thanks.
Вы когда-нибудь пользовались iKern'ом?
No.
Почему? Why?
It's not that I like kerning, but kerning has an important place in my process. It's the last time that I look at everything. And so I look at all the different combinations of letters next to each other, and so I can see, oh, you know, maybe the serifs on the W are a little bit long. Maybe that stroke on the bottom of the K is a little bit too light. Maybe the ball terminal on the A is actually a little bit annoying, and I should change it. And so I do so much minor redrawing as I kern that I don't want to take that out of my process. It's just become when I do my final checking. And so it's more than just kerning at that point. It's proofing, and it's redrawing, and it's fixing. So I'm not against the idea of iKern at all. And if you use it and you get good results, then that's a good thing. But I am too dependent on kerning as part of my proofing process to automate that or give it up.
And especially in the metrics machine, it's beautiful.
It's so
and
fast.
It's easy.
Yeah. It's beautiful, easy, and fast.
Okay, thanks.
Do you use iKern?
Yes, sometimes, but now I tried to use metrics machine and FontLab kerning, but now I think the best way is in FontLab.
I find
matrix machine. Sorry, I need to translate. Очень неудобно в matrix machine то, что я не могу поменять метрики. I cannot change metrics.
Yes.
Just kerning.
That's true.
It's very inconvenient for me because when I do kerning, I always correct metrics.
So do
and
I.
It's so complicated to go from one program to another, and it's very inconvenient.
That's what we expect in next spring, right?
Yes,
From
next
Shell.
spring this should be fixed.
We're expecting at least.
Yeah. So, I'm afraid we're out of time.
Yes, we're out of time.
But thank you very much for listening to this for 3 hours. That's incredible. I thought much more of you would have left by now.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.